Tom Feldman.
There we are.
Hey, man. All right. How are you doing today?
Good.
Good. Good to see you on the other side. Yep.
Okay, we got technology somewhat under control this morning, huh?
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So let's see. I've just got to do a few little technical things, namely to post this to the event page. Um, and so just give me 2 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know what? Um, we'll just begin our conversation because uh, every time I work with the Google On Air thing to try to optimize it, it doesn't seem to actually be very straightforward. So, hi. Um, I'll be uh, I'll be just introducing what we're doing here to people that are checking out this video on YouTube. Um, what we're doing here is we're creating a series of conversations with men that I have met personally in my life and that I've found to be outstanding models in different aspects of their life, but mainly in that they live a holistic lifestyle. And the part of that holistic lifestyle that we're diving into in these conversations, called the Embodied Fatherhood conversations, is that they are fully committed men in their families while they are at the same time living professional, creatively satisfying professional lives that are lives of meaning and service. And so I see that that is something that we could all use seeing a little bit of, and how that works, and the practices that they used, and how they've gotten there. Um, because a lot of this is about just celebrating the role of embodied fatherhood, of a fatherhood that is able to be fully embodied in community, in profession, and in family. So our guest today is Tom Feldman, um, and he's out in I always want to say Altadena, but it's not Altadena.
It's La
Um,
Cañada.
it's La Cañada, yeah. Um, so he's out in La Cañada, and Tom Feldman does these amazing workshops with Integral Family and Creating Your Future, and we met through an amazing program together with Scott Cody, who is also in these conversations. So Tom, hi.
Hi, Noah. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey.
And And what we're going to be talking with Tom about today is we're talking with Tom about the incorporation, the full-bodied incorporation of the commitment of being a father and of being a man in relationship. Because you've been in relationship with Bev for how many?
About 33 years.
Right, which is a very rare and honorable thing in today's society. So Tom, I just like to hear a little bit of your story and your process of really the very beginning, the initial phases of you stepping into fatherhood, and what you think that the beginning of that was.
Um, Well, I grew up in a family of two parents, and my father was a very loving human being, um, and someone from whom I learned unconditional love. And my mother was loving, but she had a personality disorder, and she was a borderline personality. And what that means is that when she felt that she was not in control, what she did was she started yelling. And so much of my memories of my early years were of her doing that. And as a child, and like all children, I thought I was somehow responsible or causing that. It wasn't until many, many years later that I learned that I had nothing to do with that. And then when I moved out of my parents' home after high school, I went to college. And starting in college, I started on this quest to learn what was going on, what had gone wrong, because I was unwilling to recreate it. I was unwilling to live the rest of my life that way. And I was looking, so I started learning communication tools, way back then there were things called T groups and sensitivity trainings, and I didn't know what any of that was at the time, but I participated and I learned, and I slowly started working through my stuff. My BA is in social psychology. I've been in the communications business and industry my entire adult life, and so it's a slow process. And then I started taking workshops, and then that's really where it was in a workshop that I got back in touch with my integrity, and which was which was very huge for me. It was a pivotal point.
So can you, for somebody that may not even know what integrity is, because that's not brought forth, or that's not modeled for them, what was the experience for you of stepping back into your integrity? What does that mean? Define that for us.
At the time, I was young. I was working mainly as a camera assistant, a job that I truly didn't like. And I always thought that I was a cameraman, a director of photography. And being a camera assistant, though it has this word camera in it, there's no direct route, particularly from there to being a cameraman. There are plenty of people who do their whole career as camera assistants, or at least at that time did. That was back in the days when there was film, and it's a job. It was a job I just didn't like. And then I took this workshop, and what I discovered about myself was that, and I wouldn't have said this, like if you talked to me a day before I took the workshop, I wouldn't have said this, but what I saw in myself was that I had a vision of myself and the world, and that I had simply given up on it. And I'd given up on it so much that I had forgotten about it. So, like the day before I did the workshop, if you had said, "Tom, do you have a vision?" I wouldn't even know what you're talking about. But I got back in touch with that, and I got it centered in my body. I mean, there are different words for it. You could say in your soul, you could say in, but I got it deep, and so it was like, okay, so I gotta live my life. I gotta stop resisting and being a victim and doing all this. There's a kind of, at least in my experience at that time, there's a kind of like, okay, well, I've given up, so is everybody else. So nothing really matters that much, and let's go get a drink, or and it's like if I don't show up on time, it doesn't matter, and if I blow this person off, it doesn't matter, and just sort of nothing matters. And or not that much. And that
So
was the space I was in.
yeah, so the pivotal discovery or distinction for you that led to that. If you were going to share that, if you were going to try to transmit that distinction, that awareness to a young man today or a young woman today, because you do these workshops called Creating Futures, right? Is that what it's called, Creating Futures?
Yes, it's called the Future Workshop.
Yeah, and so if you were going to transmit that distinction in one sentence or one affirmation for them or a question, how would you do that?
Well, I don't know if I can do it in one sentence, but what I can say is that each of us has a sense, and I would say from our early childhood, of what life can be for us. That life can really be a wonderful place, a wonderful thing. And that at some moment that changed and we gave up. But we can go back to that spot, that moment, that vision, that experience of life as wonder, as imagination, as possibility, as love, and live that. Now, we don't have to live our 3-year-old vision, but there's a sense of connectedness, a sense of bringing our self forward, our journey, and living that. And when people are seated in that, when people stand in the space of who they truly are, all of a sudden life entirely changes. Now life is about something, and it's about what it's about for you. And each person, it's about what it is for that person. So that's getting in relation with our authenticity, getting in relation with our deep integrity. So
And
no,
so,
that's not one sentence.
right, but let's just practice, because see, I think it's like what if, I mean, there's so many people walking through the world that if we only had the opportunity to ask them one question or say one thing to them or remind them of one thing, that that we might only have a sentence or two. So what if we did? What do you think could unlock the beginning of that exploration for them?
Is to life. I would say life is about love, and to simply start by remembering in your somewhere in your life world, most people have an experience of that.
Hmm.
And to remember that, and to get back in touch in relationship with that, and then to express it through yourself in your current life.
Hmm. And so that brings us to the expression of love in your current life and your path of becoming an embodied father. And so you did a lot of work before you even got married. You did a lot of work that I don't think a lot of people know is available to them. So could you just take us through your process that put you on the path of fatherhood with Bev?
Before we got married, we looked at first we said, we were in the conversation about getting married. So I said to Bev, I said, okay, well, we know lots of married people. Let's look around at the relationships we know and see if there's one we can model our relationship. Kind of like recipes or something. It's like somebody has a recipe for chocolate. Well, that kind of flavor is good, and this consistency is good, and that texture is good. So maybe we can borrow pieces and parts and cobble together, a better relationship out of that, a better marriage. Right? And so we looked, and these are our close friends and families and so forth. And we just came out of that investigation and went, no, there's just not one that we want to model ourselves on. And that in itself was like a tremendous realization.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, I mean, by that time, I had been studying transformation for many, many years, and had taken many, many courses, and Bev had as well. And so I took the work that I had learned and started simply to structure it in a way that I thought would serve us. So what does that mean? So we started about a 6-month process of spending at least one day a weekend, in a week, on a weekend, together, talking about important, what we both considered were important in terms of having our current and future lives work. So what might that be? So we talked about things like our birth families, and what generally is called skeletons in the closets. Those parts of our families that people don't speak out loud, but that the whole conversation revolves around.
Yeah.
And so, and then if you're the new person in the family, you don't know what's going on and why people are acting this way. So we started talking about that. And we talked about, Bev comes from a Catholic background, I come from a Jewish background. So we talked about religion and what about religion was important, and what about religion we did not want to continue. And we talked about the big three: sex, power, and money. And we talked about secrets that we have at that time, that we had not just from other people, which we did talk about, but secrets, in fact, that we had from ourselves, like things we couldn't face.
Can you give me an example of one, if you're willing? That you discovered, like a secret that you discovered was something you couldn't face, that you maybe weren't even aware of before having that conversation.
Well, I mean, for me, one of the things that was a big issue was, after studying as much as I had, what I knew at that time was, if you're not careful, you'll recreate your parents. So, and I think that most people who are adults, no matter what they thought of their parents or how poorly they thought their parents did as parents, find out fairly quickly that as adults they become like their father and mother. Either they become like them or they become the opposite of them, which is also like them, because it's a reaction to the same underlying issues.
Right.
So and I knew that at the time. So I said to Bev, I said, it's like, I can't really get a hold of precisely, what was going on with my mother, and I didn't understand it at that time. But and I didn't want to talk about it, frankly. But I don't want to recreate that in the relationship. So what I created an agreement with her that if and when I started acting like my mother, that I gave her permission, and the way she could support me was to say, "You're acting like your mother." And then if she said those words to me, my part of the commitment was, whatever I was doing, I would stop doing that. I would take that as support, not criticism, and see if I was actually in the current moment or if I was in a reaction to something from the past, and reacting in a way that was similar to or like the way my mother would react. And if that was true, then I would say so. I would say yes, and this is a way of processing out past reactivity, telling the truth about it. And so it's a very hard thing to face your demons with another person. Like, we want to be perfect in another person's eyes. We want to be good and wonderful and like that. And so to ask for support about an area where I'm weak and reactive was a way into creating something that wouldn't be there otherwise.
Well, right, and so that brings up a really big piece about vulnerability and how to like in a way we can only be as strong as our weakest shadow, maybe you could say, in relationship. And so if our shadow or our weakness isn't expressed, then we can trip on it and not be supported in growing past it, is what I hear you saying.
That's my experience.
But it's, I mean, I know that for a lot of people, it's incredibly like a lot of times the weaknesses are like layered over and layered over and layered over for as many years as they can get away with until they break down, and then all of a sudden there's this sense of betrayal. Like, wait a minute, you said you were a perfect person, and really, you're human. That's you lied. And so, but it takes a lot of guts right at the beginning to say, look, I'm in process still. This is what I'm in process with, and I'm aware of it, and I'm not perfect, but please don't run away from me. So, what was it in you, or what? How did you create, or know, or decide to have that level of trust with each other that you wouldn't run away when you were expressing your weaknesses to each other?
Well, for us, it was love. So, and a way we spoke about it at that time was we called it both feet in. So there was no leaving the relationship. And nothing that we did existed outside the relationship. Now, that's different.
Wait, hold on, because I think you just said something that's precious, and I don't want to just slide by it. Say that again and define that for me.
Okay, it's still true in our relationship. Nothing that we do personally or individually is somehow outside or excluded from the relationship. It's an agreement.
So what does that look like?
That looks like we talk to each other. So, I was out of town for 2 days, and I got home last night, and we talked, not because we had to, but because we're interested. Like, what's interesting is, look, what's interesting is if you met somebody, if you were at a bed and breakfast somewhere and met somebody who was just on their journey in life, they were just doing whatever, it's like they were here today and they were going somewhere else, they're going to England tomorrow, and they're just on their journey, right? You'd say, hey, what'd you do yesterday? What happened in your life? And that's the way we are with each other. Each of us is on our own journey, and we journey together, right? But we're on our own journey. When we come together, we go, hey, since I saw you last, what's happening? We're interested, not because we have to be interested, but we are interested. It's interesting.
Yeah. And so you two started this journey very consciously and openly with each other. And then, from my understanding, you very choicefully and invited another being along for the journey. And can you speak to your process with that? Just some of the processes in deciding and in choosing that and in laying the foundation for your daughter to come in, and share what you found really potent and impactful as far as that.
Well, we had lived together for about 6 years, 6.5 years, and at some point, both of us if I remember correctly, we were sitting on a couch together, and we kind of turned to each other and said, we're done playing house. We're done sort of living together, and either we're going to get married and have it. It's just like time. It's sort of like ding, time. And maybe that was Silver knocking on our door, but that was the experience of it. So we turned to each other and said, it's time. We're either going to get married, have a kid, or we're probably going to not be together. And I don't think we ever really considered not being together because we were close and loved being together. So, and it was just like, okay, it was just time. I don't know how else to say it. And then that's around the time we started the process of working on our relationship in preparation for marriage, and that comes out of a notion of as artists that before you start anything, before you start a painting, before you start anything, you clean up, right? You may not clean your house, no, but you get a canvas and stretch it. It's got to be, you got to prepare it properly. And I'm a photographer. You got to get your camera and you clean the lens. And those days you put film in, now you put a digital card, whatever. But you got to have all the parts and get ready. and there's a kind of, with a certain amount of cleanliness, and this is about integrity. It's like then all of a sudden you really know what's happening. So there's no confusion about, okay, so like if you're going to build a house, the first thing you do is clean the lot. And you get ready, then you start tapping in the posts and so forth. So the preparation for our marriage was cleaning the psychological, emotional space so that we could build a life together.
Mm. Mm. Can you give me one process, not a long process, but just a simple process that somebody could do today with a partner that they have, that's the beginning of that?
A simple process is committed listening, sometimes called authentic listening. So that when your partner speaks, oftentimes most people, they're constantly running, a monologue. And so the other person's speaking, and the person's not truly listening. They got to do this, and they, got to get this, and answer that email, and go get the laundry, and get the car fixed, and, and every once in a while a word comes across from the other person, But authentic listening is to just let that go and to be with the other person 100%. So much so that not only do you listen to the words they speak, but you listen to who they're being. You look at their body language. And so what you're doing in a subtle way is you're looking at the unity of the message that's coming through, not just from their words, including their words, but not only from their words. So that you're having a full-bodied relationship with the other person. So sometimes somebody will say something. Sometimes my wife or daughter will say something. They'll say one word, and I'll say, "What's the matter?" Or they'll say one word, and I'll say, "Fantastic! What happened? Because there's so much. It's not just in the verbal part, but there's so much being transmitted, and our bodies are an antenna. Not just our minds and not just our ears, but our whole bodies. So if we can relate in a full embodied way with another person, with every other person, but certainly with the person, our primary relationship in our families, then the other person feels gotten.
Yes.
The other person feels like me. There's an intimacy immediately. So there's a process to create intimacy, which is essential. Listening. There's two parts. I mean, the big one to start with is listening. And then the other kind of half of that is called committed speaking. Committed speaking means that when I talk to you or my partner or anyone, the words that come out of my mouth I'm willing to stand for. So if I were to say, no, I want to, let's have lunch next week on Monday at noon here at this restaurant, I'm going to be there. Or if I can't be there, I'm going to call you and change it. But you have 100% commitment from me.
Yeah.
And committed listening and committed speaking, those two pieces will change people's lives.
Mm. 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 That's a lovely, simple, direct, accessible exercise for anyone to do, is to just sit with a partner or even a friend. I mean, this isn't just this is about relationship, in every aspect. To sit across from each other and say, I'm listening, and then to actually listen. And when I speak, I really mean what I'm saying. It's so simple that it almost seems unworthy of being said out loud, but from listening to you, a lot of the things that I've heard you and Bev do to create such a beautiful friendship, relationship, marriage, they're really simple things.
Well, I mean, one of the things that Bev and I have is that we love each other. But another thing is, and I think that this is something that people sort of wonder about, is that we actually like each other. And liking your mate is really essential to being close to them. And I mean, it seems like counterintuitive, but I think that there's people in relationships that they don't kind of like each other.
Yeah.
And so there's a way of, this is about, if one enters into a relationship like a creative activity, not like the other person's an object, but if you were to think of it more like a process, if you will, then it's like, what can we create together? Noah? What can we create together? Right? So it's like, well, it's like if we're sitting with a child and we had a pile of blocks or something, I put a block out, child puts a block out, maybe 2, 3, I put one more out, and we're each encouraging each other to make something. So this notion of liking and loving another person is to, how can I further my wife? How can I further my child? I have no interest in containing them or in slowing them down or stuff. It's the reverse.
So that brings me to the next kind of phase, which is what was your intention, or your, like, in talking to Scott, right? His intention was, I'm going to love and be of service to my stepdaughter, no matter what. That's it. And so I'm wondering, when you and Bev were getting ready, or when you had your daughter, what did you have, like a definition of what being a father meant and looked like? And if so, can you share that definition with us?
No, I didn't. I mean, really, when I was present when Bev gave birth, and I said to the doctor after Silver was born, I said, would you take another look and see if there's an instruction manual in there? Because it was and both Bev and I were kind of like, okay, well, how do you do this? But for us, kind of reeling it back a little bit, what's fundamental to a relationship, any relationship, all relationship, is commitment. Now, a lot of people have like a thing about commitment, like I don't do that or I don't want that. But the bad news is, or the good news is that we are always 100% committed. period. The question is, what are you committed to? So if you think of commitment as the net under the high wire act of your life, right? You don't want to, if you happen to fall, go, ooh, whoops, there's right where I fell, there was no commitments there to catch me, right? So in creating our relationship and doing our relationship work, it's like we both feed in the relationship, like no one's leaving, like that. What we're doing is we're consciously creating our lives together, and then when our daughter was born, there's one more journey, right? So the image that we carried, it was just a natural image that arose for me, is that together, Bev and we're in life together, each on our own journey, holding hands as we do our lives together. And then all of a sudden, well, there are three of us now, holding hands. But I don't want either person, either my daughter or my wife, to live my journey. They can't, or me to live theirs. So part of the process for us in having a child was to empower, if you will, to discover, to offer, as she, right from the beginning, like what, kind of what will grow your spirit, what will have you be successful, right? And I don't mean this in some abstract way, and I don't mean it in some way that's not grounded, because it's like children have to learn a lot. They have to learn in the space of they don't know the difference between sticking their hand in the air and sticking it in fire. So you have to teach a child, to look both ways before you cross the street. Don't don't touch the hot burner. So there's a lot of rules that have to be learned, and and some children it's easier than others, and so forth. But whatever, children have to learn it, or there's a high price to pay for it. So, but along the way, so even, or is giving a child the tools to have the maximum amount of freedom means they have to have a lot of structure. So, if a child knows that they have to look both ways before they cross the street, then they can, at a certain point, can be trusted to cross the street by themselves. If a child doesn't seem to learn that, then they can't. So they don't have as much freedom, and that's
right.
true in all domains.
Yeah. So it's that structure is the pathway to freedom.
It's a coin. It has that. Freedom and limitation are two sides of the same thing.
Yeah. And so on this journey that you guys were taking very consciously and very choicefully, something happened, and it disrupted the journey a little bit in its own way. Can you speak to the challenges of that and a little bit of what happened?
Well, at the age of 13, our daughter got extremely ill, and so ill that we had to take her out of school, and she missed 2 years of high school. And you said disrupt the journey, and I would say it felt like that. What it did was it disrupted the picture of the journey. I wouldn't say it disrupted the journey. So she was very ill for many years, and it was a very difficult time. We were, and the doctors mainly were not very helpful. It took more than half a year to get a diagnosis that fit the symptoms, and she lost her friends. We lost many of our friends who simply abandoned us. And
now, why did they abandon you?
I can't say, frankly, but what I can say is they did. And it was very bizarre. but it is what happened. I mean, we were so concentrated on at first finding a diagnosis, and then once we had a diagnosis and getting proper treatment, and we wound up flying across the country many times, and uh, we just simply did what we had to do. Uh,
I know I mean, it's so easy to say we did what we had to do, and yet, once again, it's that's the montage part of the movie where somebody is finally is doing what they have to do, and we compress it all into 30 seconds, and really I think that's where a lot of life happens, is in that montage of doing what we have to do. That's where the commitment really is. And so, what were some of the big challenges that, because a lot of people might not have persevered through the way that you did and the way that your entire family did. And so what was it that allowed you, or that gave you the strength to persevere through? Because I mean, your friends leaving you in a time of distress and need is not an easy thing at all. And and if you don't have the full support of your family, and anybody that's ever suffered an illness, or any having to do with hospitals at all, knows that just the financial strain, and just that now your focus is on living as opposed to thriving, and like business, and like all those things can be impacted. So can you speak to those challenges, and what it was that, what processes, or what awareness, or what mantras did you utilize to carry your family through that?
what seems to me to be so is that I'm on a journey, like that life is a journey. It's a metaphor, but it seems to me to be so. And so it doesn't make any sense to me to go, okay, well, it got hard here, so I'm leaving my life and I'm going over here because it'll be easy. I don't even know what that means. And I know what you're saying, because we were in a community where we witnessed a number of people who abandoned, usually the fathers who abandoned their families. And there's no, in my view, my worldview, there's no exit. There's no, I'm on my journey. Whatever I do, it's a piece of my journey. It's a piece of me evolving my consciousness. It's a piece of me creating my life. And because I got a big problem to solve, and I may or may not be successful, does not mean that, maybe I should move somewhere else. Because when I move somewhere else, I'm still the same person. Right? I've just simply, if I have, avoided the problem. But that doesn't mean that that's not part of my journey. I don't know if I'm saying this very well, but
Yeah,
what shows up on my plate is on my plate. It's not something else. I already chose it. So I chose to have a daughter. I chose to have a child. What happens, happens. It's like, I'm in. Period. So it's like, okay, this is not easy. This was not easy. It was the most not easy thing I've ever done in my life. And it went on for a very long time, not being easy. I did not sleep for years, really. I mean, just little naps and stuff.
How long did it go?
Almost 8 years.
8 years.
Mm-hmm. However, mean, where you started was, well, this interrupted her journey. Well, if you zoom back, it's like, well, this became fundamental to who she has become.
Hmm.
And she now has a wonderful, joyful appreciation of life and of the privilege to be healthy and to be with other people. Something that's unlikely she would have had in the way she has it if she hadn't gone through that. So I'm not saying that that was a good thing to go through, and if I had had a choice, or if I could redo it, I wouldn't do it. But given that it did happen, it's like it's the old lemonade question. So you got a bunch of lemons. What are you doing? So are you going to make lemonade out of it? A lot of people have difficulties in life. We all do. One of the things that life is very clever about is, rolling rocks out as our car is going around the mountain bend, and all of a sudden, oh, whoops, crash. And okay, so now what are we going to do? Right? And I look at that as an opportunity to create, an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to look within and see what I can do to make me, to grow me into a bigger human being, a bigger consciousness, to do the same with my wife and child, and if we're with other people, if they're interested, just to see, with them.
So what that speaks to me of is that there's a deeper value structure that you operate upon, because as you said, you were living in a community where a lot of times one of the parents, and a lot of the times it would be the fathers, would leave, and I would assume that it was between the ages of like 5 and 7, because statistically that seems to be when a father leaves, and they leave because it's not easy, it gets difficult, or it isn't fun anymore. And yet what you're speaking to is that's your value structure is not, is this fun, is this easy, and what am I getting out of the deal?
Well, life is a lot of things, and occasionally it's fun, and occasionally it's easy. And my own experience is that most of it has to do with how we come into life. In other words, being the guy in the house, I get to take out the garbage. Now, I could have that be, kind of, like, oh, I have to take out the garbage, or I could just have it be like, okay, it's, beautiful here, and the trees are turning colors, whatever, right? I get to decide that. I get to decide how I hold what we might call the difficulties of life. Right? So you get the flat tire, do you throw a fit, or do you go, oh, it's an opportunity to meet a person? It's like, would I have chosen this? No, I wouldn't have chosen this, but it's a circumstance that simply is here. So what can I make out of the circumstance? Am I going to be run by the circumstances? Like, okay, this is the circumstance, and now I have to conform to it? Or am I going to use the circumstance like an ingredient in a creation?
Yeah.
So, and that's up to us.
Well, let's speak to that a little bit. That, I'm highlighting the challenge that you and your family persevered through, because perseverance, and like you're saying, commitment, and that's another thing that Scott Cody says is commitment, is something that isn't quite fully embodied in the culture of parenting and fatherhood currently, but there's rewards to commitment, and there's rewards to not always looking for the easy and the fun path. So can you speak a little bit the present and to the family, the quality of family that you enjoy now?
Sure. I have a wonderful family. You know, I can't believe what a good family I have. And we love each other. We are in communication with each other. We do things for each other. We are excited at our, you know, when things go well, and if things aren't going well, we do our best to help out. And so, for me, it's the family I always wanted. I didn't know that I was going to get this, you know, to get to have a family like this. This is not the way I was brought up. So this is wonderful, you know, and it's a privilege. And you know, my wife and daughter are wonderful human beings who live extraordinary lives, and part of what's extraordinary is they, you know, do their work and they contribute to people, and they're of service. And it's a commitment. I mean, for me, there's a bigger frame here, and the bigger frame is that for me, we live in a spiritual world. And the spiritual, there's a unity. There's a, you know, it's like there's an importance to having regard for other people and for including and being connected and you know and being a part of, you know, those lives that where you can and where you know where people want to do that. And I have a wife and daughter who are just wonderful and do that. You know, and do that with our family and do that with other people.
Well, that's why I love you guys, and that's why I asked for this conversation, is because just being in the same room with you and your family is inspiring, and shows, you know, what is on the other side of the fire that we all might be afraid of. Because I think that in life there's always going to be a bit of a fire. Like, it's trying to live a life with no fires is like living a life where at the other side there's no unbreakable bonds, because the bond that I see with your family is so strong, and it's such a message for others. And so just as we wrap this up, you know, it's like, my inspiration for having these conversations is because I've written a children's story about a young man following his heart, committing to his vision, and having a transformational experience because of it, and now I'm sharing that, right? And you are taking what you've done and the life that you've created, and all these processes that you've honed and discovered throughout your relationship, and the questions that you know to ask, and you're starting to bring that to others through coaching, but also through workshops, and I think, if I understand it, to families, but I don't really know how that works. So what's the offer? What's the service that you are most passionately bringing forth into the world right now?
Well, in my work with families, which is very exciting, I work with individuals, usually the mom and dad, and then to some degree with the family. And in the last 50 years, there's been extraordinary breakthroughs in our knowledge of developmental patterns, developmental psychology. And it's very, very useful. It's parallel to before people had physical tools. You know, it's like, well, you wouldn't build a skyscraper if you had mud and a stick, right? So now we have these, you know, psychological and sociological and communication relationship tools that are fantastic. They're fantastic not because they're academic, but because they're effective. And you can take them into your life world, and things change. And with the articulation of developmental psychology, it's possible to know as a child grows about where they are, and what's healthy, what's not healthy, and where they're going. And if you could have a sense of uh, as a child's growing, how to encourage them as well as give them healthy boundaries, all of a sudden be like, well, okay, let's do that. That's good. Okay, so but we do know that, and so and a lot of parents don't know that. So I help them. Learn about what's appropriate at different developmental levels for their children, how to be with their children in a way that evokes their spirit rather than that suppresses it. And I've had some wonderful turnarounds from children who were acting out, and all of a sudden now they're into a creative project, and it's very exciting because it's getting people aligned with what they have to do in life, right? And then,
So, yeah, so that's the transformation that you offer is by working with families and parents, you align them with, what would you say is the most potent or the most exciting transformation that you get to experience when you're working with children and families?
well, it's just that. I mean, just recently there was a girl who's 8 or so, and she was acting out in this family, meaning she wasn't towing the line and doing their chores, and and she was unhappy and all of that. And and the way that the parents were speaking to her, I asked them to alter some of the ways they were speaking, and to actually listen to what she said.
Hmm.
And to respond, and then she was at that time, a few months ago, very interested in drawing, and so a project was decided on that she would make her own comic book. And her mom thought, well, I don't know if she can do that. And I said to her mom's homeschooling her, and I said, your job is to have her be successful. Right. So there's no question about, you can't go into it wondering whether she's going to be successful.
Hmm.
That's unacceptable. You have to go in knowing that she's going to be successful and finding out how she is successful. Now, she may be extremely successful, but success meaning that she's really going to make this happen, right? Not like it's going to be Picasso or Marvel Comics or something, but that she's going to express herself through the medium of comics. Okay, so now all of a sudden it's like every minute this girl she's been making comics and watching YouTube videos on how to draw faces, and she got so excited. She was like, okay, she's 100% engaged, right? And all of a sudden she's not acting out. She's really working on this thing. Okay, and what is happening? She's learning to express herself through this medium, which she may or may not be interested in later. It doesn't matter. But she's learning how to express herself. She's having a win. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's good for her. It's good for the parents.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Well, look, I know our time is up, but I thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing so many processes with people that can watch this video. And it's tomfeldman.com, Creating Futures, and it's a beautiful. I mean, even if you go there, I think there's even a you just sign up and you can get 7 relationship secrets document, which is awesome, and it's free. And then once again, go to the StarBoy Kickstarter campaign and find the book. And all the, tomfeldman.com, that'll be underneath the video, as well as all the other information. So, Tom, thank you, man. This has been beautiful, and your story and your family is an inspiration.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.